Lucky us.
Yeah, lucky you guys. Well, welcome everyone. Really glad to have you all here. You know, we have started doing a little bit of dreaming here at Wood Lake, which is why we're here. We have been imagining what Wood Lake can be, what our spaces can be, and more importantly, like what all that means for ministry here at Wood Lake Lutheran Church. And so we think there's a lot of we have a team. I'm going to invite Cindy Hansen up here. We've had a team that has been really dreaming up some ideas for what Wood Lake could be, could look like. Cindy's going to tell us a little bit about how we got here. Cindy is our leadership board president.
Yes.
So, thank you, Cindy.
Yeah. You're just saying that because I've mentioned you and bragged about you for all of these talks that we've done. So our resident architect is here. So, a few years ago, all of you have been noticing our lighting is bad, our sound system is bad. We need to update the live stream. So there was talk about getting together and doing things about it, and then you
Come on
just set it there, Beth. Lori and Gary won't.
Can send it here.
Yeah.
Can we trust Lori?
I also wanted to ask you, what do I do with the rest of the soup and sandwiches?
Just leave it there. These people will maybe take it when they go home.
There you go.
Thanks, Beth.
Sounds like a good idea.
Then pandemic hit. And after that, the pastors got a group together, and it's a diverse group of people. It was Pastor Cannon, Scott Dahlquist, Gary Nix from Properties, Jacob Thompson, Justin Berkeley, Rick Sundstrom, and me, Paul Olson. And we got together and started talking. And Pastor Cannon visited Herb Ketchum one day, and he started talking about Herb's architectural firm that he started. And Herb said, why don't you call them and see what they have to say? And that group has worked here before, has a lot of respect at Wood Lake, and we ran it past, as I have said, our resident architect, and Paul spoke highly of them, and his company was too busy to do it anyway. But Alliance is the name of the company, and they met with us many times, and they really started us talking. And today, I was thinking about the first drawing that you're going to see with the walkway, and that came up from Alliance because they were listening to what we were saying, and they thought that this was what we might be interested in because of what we were saying. And we want all of the changes that we do to enhance our ministry, and that's what it's all about. And that's what Alliance is all about too. So they met many, many times with us and got us to talk about things, had some suggestions, and what you're going to see tonight are the drawings that they came up with.
Cindy,
Yes,
what kind of boundaries were given to Alliance?
none.
None, okay.
All right, so that's a little bit of how we got here. We could even dive in farther with our new mission statement and our logo and some of the things like that. But really, what this process has been focused on is like how can our physical space, how can our building drive us into ministry with our community? So I am going to actually invite the resident architect himself, Paul Olson, forward to talk about what we dreamed up and what that looks like. And so I'll get those pictures out for you, Paul.
Sure. And to address that on boundaries, I think the point was this is a visioning session. It was about what could happen, what do we want, what do we need, and then go from there and how that brings back. The second to the Alliance's process, they're also practical, so they're not going to say, let's just tear the whole thing down and start over. They know that's not the case, so there is some practicality. I wonder if the second slide, let's start.
You want to start with the second?
Or what's the plan?
Oh,
Right before, go back.
Oh, you want to go up
Back.
higher?
And I know it's a little bit on the,
You
go
start
with the
here.
site.
Okay.
There's actually several areas that we looked at. One was the site, because we know there's going to be changes needed for that. One was the worship spaces, both worship spaces, because we've even though we've always used the fellowship hall for worship, alternative worship over the years, off and on, it also has to stay multi-purpose, but we are now using it more primarily for worship and what can happen there. And then also just the gathering space, the entry zone. But then because all God's children, we wanted to see how we can best utilize the education. So those are kind of the main items. And plans are hard for people to read that don't read them. This is the church in white. There's stuff in it. And this is just an idea of what could happen with the parking lot. Now, we've all walked through the parking lot. We've all slipped on the parking lot. And yet there's practicality of being able to drop people off, of being able to pick them up, and yet still have access. So this, someday we have to redo the lot in the relative near future. Here's a thought of taking the front entry, moving the driveway over, and still having enough of the accessible stalls, actually opening up the side for driving through so that the parking is, it's a little bit farther away for general parking, but it's not much different than what we have. But more importantly, we've got this kind of central access that goes right in through the front door on a safe sidewalk that we're not walking down the roadway or having to walk over. So it's a vague concept, but I think it's important to start off with that. And then as we go into the next overall, the whole point was that access, which connects all the way through. There was trees, and then the next view will go, this is, yeah, why don't we go to that view? Just, here's an idea. What does the church look like that really almost all the way, even though this is just through the middle of the parking lot, you can see it from the street better. You can connect it through, and it becomes part of the promenade into the main doors instead of just, what's that thing in the back of the parking lot? Oh, that's the church. There's kind of a disconnect right now.
It widens up the area where we have the lawn service too.
No, that was the other important thing. This preserves the lawn.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
widens it.
Yeah, it
It
widens it.
widens it.
And part of the process can be to, whether it's leveling it, improving the sidewalks so that we can use it again. Right now we've kind of avoided it because it is harder for walkers and for, it's broken sidewalks. So it preserves that space so that we can use it in the future while also still maintaining, well, we still have to drop people off and pick them up. There's still going to be weddings and funerals and other things like that. But yeah, go back to the plan just to explain. So the building plan, I think this is where it gets into nuts and bolts, but the views that they talk about. So one was looking straight at the front entry. The next one will be a view in the narthex. Another one will be down the hallway toward the fellowship hall, because as we said, the fellowship hall is now a worship space. We have multiple groups of people that come in. Where do you go? This is a great, wonderful, narthex. You probably go forward to go to the sanctuary, but if you're going to an alternative service, where do you go? So those were some of the questions that were asked. And now, let's go on to the 2. So here's not much different about the narthex. There was discussion about water, so we thought of maybe a water feature somewhere in there. Kids can go up to, and yet it doesn't break up the space, because that's been a nice space for gatherings, it's been a nice space for small concerts and programs and things like that. But it also creates more of a focus onto, it really is, when you see in the next scene, both worship spaces. And the one important thing here, the flooring, right now there's the front carpet area, but then there's the old tile that's out in front of it from the original narthex. But as you see, as part of the visioning, opening up the brick wall as much as they can, where the doors, right now the existing doors are the 3 down the center, but somehow opening that up so that you can see into the sanctuary from the narthex. So not just with the doors open, glass, and it can be a dual purpose space. People can go out in there and still feel, it's not just on audio, they can see what's going on, but also that's going to be the obvious direction for people to connect. But then on the next one, so here's the entry vestibule. The idea is, okay, we can turn down, let's brighten up that hallway, let's lighten it up. And one thing that they talked about is, this is the wall where the coat room is now. And so where this table is shown, that's kind of where that big coffee table is. The thought was it could open it up so it will feel more inviting to go to the fellowship hall. It's always just kind of been down the corridor and it's way down there. And if you look, it actually has a sign above it, but you wouldn't know it. So knowing the fellowship hall, and there'll be other, you know, just daily signage things, but these were areas that they talked about, and bringing the flooring and everything so that kind of brings it all together. And then the fourth space was the fellowship hall. We know it's multi-purpose. I remember when it was a gymnasium, but it was always a multi-purpose space for dining and for gathering and even for worship. And
Well, initially it was the sanctuary.
yeah, and initially it was the original sanctuary till they could raise the money to do the second one. So I remember the stage, I call it the stage, but that was the altar area that later became the rest of the kitchen. So their concept was make sure we can, they're not changing anything other than wall finishes, brightening it up a little bit. The biggest change might have been a different ceiling surface that maybe makes it a little bit more, it's still multi-purpose, but just feel a little bit less institutional, because it actually kind of feels a little like a gymnasium still, only without the basketball hoops. But their thought was maybe it might be best to focus, and we use the stage, it may be the temporary platforms, against the back wall with the lights for the worship space, instead of the corner, which would have been, you know, currently to the right side of this this room. So not a lot of changes, and not significant that would cost a lot. I mean, they talked about we should open it up, and they knew, well, yeah, practicality is leave the structure alone, work with what we got, and update the finishes and the feel of the space to warm it up a little bit. Another area, site-wise, and I won't make you go back, was we do, well, from our landscape, our north side faces the school, and it faces the community, the apartments and everything else. And yet right now, it's very much a back door, and our garbage bins are just kind of a fenced-in area that's falling apart. So the thought was, well, does this identify as Woodlake? Does it identify as a church from the back? If people are going to theoretically come back and forth, if we continue this good partnership with the children and the youth of the middle school to come to this back door. So the idea was signage was one, and even the back of that roof area. Let's just bring in some imagery and some signage to dress it up and have it a little bit more identifiable that this is Woodlake, and it's not just the backside, we're not turning our backside to that. And believe me, we talked about a lot of things. We talked about entry and whether we open that up and different things, but I think it all just came down to making it just a little bit nicer than it was. And again, we work through all these, we prioritize, and we'll go from there. But, and then this space, I don't know if anyone else wants to talk about it. Maybe we go back to that plan.
Sure.
Okay.
Like up here?
Yeah, building plan, and this is good. So as we know, we got MICC on the north, So we're not really touching much of that, even though the chapel's still down there. And there's still opportunities with this courtyard here and the connections. You know, we're in this room, this is the courtyard, the chapel. So these are still, you know, common use spaces, and we may still investigate what options are, but it wasn't primary to kind of our mission. And since youth and children are, the education wing and the connection from worship to education was kind of a big deal. And so what was indicated is really new carpet, new paint, new, you know, sprucing up what's there. There may be some reworking of the components inside those, but it's mostly down at this end space. We thought, what can we do to make a nicer, more permanent space for youth, and it still be a good hangout spot that would be fun, and yet it's still located somewhere that they could call their own. And what this image is the wall was removed from the corridor of that last room, opened up the ceiling, opened up the space, and made it this multi-purpose gathering space, but it's still also, you know, a good hangout space. Yes, it's open to the door, which is right to the right, so the door just goes straight out to those steps. But we get the use of the basketball and potential other activities that could be in the parking lot, and yet it's still some space that is really key for the youth and for young adults to gather and call it their own. So that's kind of what we mostly went through.
Did you have any other final thoughts there, Paul?
No. I mean, that was kind of the main overview.
The main overview. Yeah. No, that was perfect. I love that because I think that sets it up. I get to talk about the fun stuff now. I think, at least it's fun for me. I get to talk about the ministry possibilities of these spaces, right? And so I'm going to go through these same photos we went through, but talk about why we would do this and how it could actually drive us into ministry a little bit, right? So I think, you know, one of the things with this was a fun idea that Alliance, Cindy mentioned this. Alliance kind of came up and they pitched this to us. And at first I was kind of like, no, but then they showed me the picture and I was like, yeah, you know, it's really cool. Because what you've got is this sort of like, you know, Paul was talking about this, you have this sort of direct line, and if you follow this path, it takes you all the way into the sanctuary, which is really neat for a couple reasons. It ties into, you'll notice like even the floorboards point towards the sanctuary, which is kind of neat. And then you're actually walking past, there will be 2 water features, which we'll get into. You saw the one in the picture. And then there's one that's just not pictured in the sanctuary space as well, which I forgot to share the sanctuary space picture, so I'll go into that in a second. But, so there's that sort of visual being drawn into the sanctuary, which is really neat. But then also we have extra green space for like youth to play games, to do their, you know, tag. It could be the little kids being out to play tags. It could be a picnic. It could be worship, summer worship outside, just expanding summer worship. You know, we've had folks who have come and joined Wood Lake because they saw us doing worship or they saw our advertisement for our outdoor worship and just came and checked it out. So it's an opportunity for us to sort of like be visible and then to have this amazing, beautiful space. One of the, Monique Roop came up to me after we did the first town hall presentation, and she said, you know, there's this reminded me, this picture of this old Greek proverb that says, you know, if a society is flourishing when the elderly plant trees that they'll never see the shade of, right? Because that's this indication they're thinking about the next generation, and that's the image that's kind of stuck with me. Those are the words that have kind of stuck with me. So there's that open space, lots of possibility there. And I know there's also some downfalls. I think people have brought up, well, we lose our drive-through access and things like that, which is really important, and we hear that as well. So this space is really cool too. One of the things we talked about, there's sort of a new term for me, was wayfinding, right? If you're new to a space, how do you instinctively kind of find your way around? And the sanctuary, I think generally speaking, is pretty easy to find in this particular building, which is nice. But what about the other spaces, and what about all the other things in the space? And so, opening this kind of space up and doing some of the things they did made it even more intuitive, right? The glass walls makes it really intuitive. Where to go? Oh, there's the church. You know, that's where we head in. Also, this baptismal feature here, we call it a baptism. It's a water feature. It's also a baptismal feature. There's a Bible verse on it that we'll actually hear in church on Sunday. Zoom in so you all can see it. It says, "But those who drink the water that I will give them will never be thirsty. The water that I will give will become in them a spring of water gushing up to eternal life." This is the words that Jesus tells to the woman at the well when she's seeking to get water in the middle of the day. Zoom out a little bit there. And so we wanted to put that baptismal feature kind of up front because we have 2 worship spaces now, right? We have the sanctuary and we have this one as well. And what's neat about that is little kids can come in and they can splash in it. That's okay. Or people can come in and they can dip their finger in the water and remind themselves of their baptism, right? Which is deeply Lutheran. Yeah, Molly.
Is there a way to contain the water so that water isn't spilling? And
Oh yeah.
people are-
Yeah, it would not, the feature would not look like this at all.
Right. Okay.
This
So
is-
like tile floor and water is never good.
Yeah, it would be horrible. This is just an idea, right?
Okay.
It's an idea of like, hey, there could be a water feature there.
Yeah.
And so there's all sorts of like neat ways you can do it. You can have higher walls, you can, people talked earlier about, hey, what if it's more of an enclosed thing? So there's all sorts of possibility there. But yeah, we definitely wouldn't like
Yeah.
be dripping onto the floor and all that stuff. So, but that's a really good point. Another thing you'll notice is the welcome desk, which is on the right-hand side, is gone right now. There's extra seating there. Paul talked about that a second ago. But you got different kinds of, there's like standing coffee tables, like really nice, but there's also comfortable places to sit. And again, these glass doors kind of just give a really warm, inviting feel. So if you're new, you're like, okay, you automatically know where to go. You automatically kind of understand where you should be headed. So Paul was referring to this little area over here. That would be essentially our new welcome center. It would take up maybe a third or a quarter of the current coat space. And what's cool about that, I mean, you can imagine a little coffee thing back there. You can imagine serving treats from that. It also eliminates like the coffee treat table that's out there. And just kind of builds it into the building, which seems to make a lot of sense to me. So you have that little space built in automatically. You still have plenty of space for coats and things like that. And it can also be, like I said, a welcome center. People that you can, as a staff, will volunteer there and say, hey, new people are coming in. Which way is the modern worship service? Oh, that's actually this way. Which way is MICC? Oh, MICC is up around the corner there. So the bathrooms are just drawn a little differently, so people mentioned that before. Don't worry about that. That's not actually an update. That's just how they drew the side of the building. They probably should have taken a picture or something. But so that would be that area. Again, this is all about wayfinding. This is about how do new people kind of intuitively like find their way in a space, and how do they feel welcome in a space. So a lot of warm colors, a lot of updates in that area as well. So one thing that's neat about this space that was just an idea floated to me. I don't even know if it's included in this drawing or not, but they were like, what if this stage is kind of like a Murphy bed that kind of can fold up and down so that you can use that space. You can open it up and play dodgeball in there for a lock-in, or you can keep it and use that space for funerals, and you can use it for modern worship. So there's lots of opportunities there. You can also think about there would also be AV upgrades in here as well, because the AV system, if you think it's bad in the sanctuary, it's way worse in the fellowship hall. It's pretty bad in there. So, but we made it. We're making it work, right? We're patching it together here and there, and we're creating beautiful worship. But it's hard for us to share right now. It's hard for us to share in meaningful ways. We don't live stream that service yet because it's hard. It would have to be like just me on my phone like this, doing live streaming the service, as opposed to having a permanent system that can focus on a face and you can hear the music clearly, because the music is so beautiful. Monica and her band do such great work. We want to highlight that and give it its due. So you see we kind of kept the round tables. Those can be moved in and out, stackable chairs, so that the space remains flexible for all the many things we use it for. Okay, so this is cooler, even like a bigger thing than I think it looks like. This would be like bang for the buck. We talked about, so we just started hosting the Boys and Girls Club stuff here, which has been really great. They've actually been in this very room, and we've been doing cooking classes. And we did it all through the month of February. We're taking a little break. We might start up again in April and finish out through June, and then maybe do a bit even bigger program in the fall. We're super excited about that. Now, the Boys and Girls Club kids are like, they are these kids here, They're literally like coming across the street and coming in. And I was noticing the other day that, that side of the building is kind of the side of the building that we sort of neglected a little bit. Not because intentional, but you know how sometimes like your front door at your house, you shovel the front door? But the back door, sometimes you're like, eh. I feel like, in some ways we've kind of unintentionally done that. We've thought, this is our back door, and this is our front door. But I think we should actually start thinking about, if you come by here at 3:30 any day of the week, well, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday, this is busier than 76. I mean, it's families driving by, it's all sorts of things happening. So what if we thought of that as our front door and that as our front door, right? This is a welcoming space. This is a way we can welcome kids when they come in. Little things like signage and things like that. We shared this at staff meeting this week, and they had a great idea. What if we had a sign out there, like an electronic sign like we have out in front, only back there, and we can say, hey, there's a lock-in coming up in 2 weeks. Sign up on the website. There's going to be inflatables and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, all of a sudden, you've got hundreds of parents driving by and a captive audience, basically, because they're just like, where are my kids? And they're like, oh, what is this new, it's an opportunity. And it's something, because we're always physically facing ourselves this way with our building, we haven't sort of like opened ourselves up this way to the middle school, to the kids over there. So it's a really cool opportunity for us. So little things that can create big change in a church. It's about our orientation. And then, right, the dream is that once you sort of are able to connect with this side of the building, this side of the church, that the things that are happening over there, then you have a space that we can bring them into, and not a space that's just sort of like, oh, that's a space, right? We want a space where kids come in and say, wow, that looks cool. Like, that looks fun. That looks like a place where I want to be. Like, not just like a place where it's like, a place where I want to be. A place where I feel comfortable. A place where, I feel like was created for me. And we think this sort of starts to do that, right? What they did, they kind of gave it this industrial look above, which is sort of kind of trendy in a lot of ways, very cool. Got the ping pong table, got the hangout areas. The rooms would sort of be like upgraded and refurnished and painted and just kind of made to feel, modern and youthful and that sort of thing. So that we can use it for those purposes, so that kids come in, not just kids, but kids and families and people say, wow, like this place has been created so that these kids feel welcome. These kids feel like they've got a place that they want to be. A safe place, and of course, physical space does something for that, but relational space is the most important. We know that, right? Like connecting with kids personally, connecting with families,